Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I wasn't going to post this, but my friend convinced me to. So I work at a grocery store and it was pretty slow today. I was super bored and had like 2 hours left in my shift. So I was wandering around and I was looking for my friend, who was also my co-worker. Right as I was rounding the corner to the produce section, I heard people arguing near the winery and the crying baby. Me being curious and bored, decided to check it out. Well, turns out it was my friend. He was arguing with this woman with an oversized baby bag and a stroller with what looked to be a pretty irritated baby. I walked up to them to try and mediate the situation. And this woman looked to be around her mid-30s. She had obnoxiously and obviously dyed blonde hair and a horrible tan. She looked super irritated when she saw me and rolled her eyes when I started to talk to her. Turns out she had been stealing wine. She was stuffing wine bottles in her baby bag and even hid one behind her baby, which explains her crying. Laying on top of a wine bottle can't be comfortable. My friend had caught her stuffing one of the bottles in her bag, which led to their little argument. When I finally got the context of the situation, I then asked the lady to return the bottles since it was obvious she wasn't going to buy them. Then she started to get irate. "Ma'am, you need to return these wine bottles. They are store property." "No," friend tells her, "you need to give these back. I caught you in your attempt to steal them and you need to put them back. I'm a tax-paying citizen. I basically own this store. You wouldn't have jobs without me." At this point, the situation was escalating way too much and other people were beginning to look at us. Eventually, my manager came out to see what was up. My friend and I were in the middle of explaining the situation to him, and the lady just took off. She left her stroller behind, by the way. My manager radioed our store security and they stopped her at the entrance. I had to push her stroller over to where the guards were keeping her. When the crazy woman realized she wasn't going to get away, she took one of the bottles in her bag and threw it at the manager. It barely missed his head and it was pretty bad. The security guards had to tackle her to stop her from getting out another bottle. One of my other co-workers called the police and my manager was so mad. He was screaming at the lady. I don't know if he will be pressing charges against her or not, but I was put in charge of taking the rest of the wine bottles and had to put them away. My friend was trying to calm down her still crying baby. The police eventually came and they are in the process of arresting her. Update. So my manager is pressing charges. Child Protective Services was called on a lady, but it turns out the baby wasn't even her kid. It was her niece. She was supposed to be babysitting and took her baby to the store. The baby's mother, the entitled mother's sister, apologized profusely to my manager and explained everything. She said her sister was a known alcoholic and substance addict, but had been telling her and her family that she had been clean for 3 years and that she had gone to rehab. I genuinely couldn't believe what I was hearing. I personally would never leave my baby with a known abuser, no matter how clean they claim to be. But that's just my opinion. The mother told us that she's a single mom and she had to work overtime and needed someone to watch her daughter for a couple hours. Her regular sitter couldn't come and her parents were on vacation. So she decided to take a chance on her sister. She had no idea that she was this unhinged. The entitled woman was arrested for shoplifting and attempted assault with a deadly weapon. My manager is pressing charges for emotional distress. Child Protective Services let the mother keep her baby, but I'm pretty sure they are going to be conducting a search on a baby's living conditions. I feel so bad for her, honestly. Anyways, my friend and I were also reprimanded for confronting a shoplifter because that does go against store policy, and he unleashed a bunch of chaos by doing so. I understand why we aren't allowed to, but I couldn't in good conscience watch an unhinged woman possibly endanger a baby. So yeah, that's pretty much what happened. A story of accidental sweet revenge. Recently, there was a protest near my city against the expansion of an open-pit mine into a natural and highly biodiverse area. Protesters went to occupy the mine, trespassing, and slept there. Now, I fully support their cause, and I truly believe protests have their place in most countries, but there are a few reasons why I think their approach to the situation is dumb. Namely, the fact my country is one of the rare truly direct democracies in the world. If you want something changed, literally anyone can go collect signatures for it, and it gets put up for a vote if you collect enough of them. The number is relatively low and very achievable. By extension, the government tends not to really respond to illegal protests, strikes, and so on. I know this is not essential to the story, but I'm simply trying to illustrate how this protest wasn't doing much other than putting people in danger and feeding the egos of a bunch of idiots who look like they are cosplaying as parents' disappointments who want to make a statement. If they were collecting signatures, I'd be the first to sign. The story starts when a friend approached me to ask me if I had a sleeping bag I could lend to her. I didn't understand that she wanted it because she was planning on going to that protest, and I would never have lent it to her had I known exactly what she was planning on doing with it, because, well, it's clear that event could only have been a crap show. Bunch of drunk/high people illegally camping on the edge of an enormous man-made cliff. Anyways, being the trusting idiot I am, I lent her the sleeping bag without second thought. She went to the protest and just left the sleeping bag lying around while she went off to do her protesty stuff. Now the issue with leaving stuff lying around at that kind of event is that these people are also highly opportunistic anarcho-communists. The sleeping bag disappeared instantly. When my friend realized this, she went to speak to one of the organizers. By his own account, this is the conversation he had with one of the protesters. "Hey, do you know who that sleeping bag belongs to?" "No idea." "You can take it." "Nice." And then he walks off with a sleeping bag. Yep, that's how selfish, inconsiderate, and stupid these people are. By the way, the organizer still doesn't understand what is wrong with what he and the protester did. I can picture this idiot thinking to himself, "It isn't her sleeping bag, it's our sleeping bag." Anyways, the sleeping bag was gone. I wouldn't care that much about it if it wasn't for the fact that the sleeping bag belonged to my grandfather, who suffered from Parkinson's disease and passed away a few years ago. I never got to know him while he wasn't in pain, and it was truly heartbreaking to grow up watching him get weaker and weaker every time I saw him. To me, that sleeping bag represented a time where he was healthy enough to go out and enjoy a weekend camping in nature. It really meant a lot to me, and I'm wondering why I lent it to anyone in the first place. Sometimes I have too much faith in people not being idiots/jerks. There is literally a 0 chance of me ever seeing that sleeping bag again, and it's thrown me into a weird, semi-grieving state of mind, coupled with absolute disbelief of the hypocrisy that occurred at that protest. However, there is a bright side to the story, and that bright side is called sweet, sweet revenge. Although, I have to admit it was completely accidental. You see, the protesters who were occupying that mine are all very hardcore vegans, to the point of being perfectly happy going to jail over the illegal stuff they do on a regular basis to support their cause. Well, it turns out that my grandfather's sleeping bag was manufactured before synthetic insulating fillers were widespread. Suckers absolutely filled to the brim with, wait for it, goose, down of all things. Down is a really soft feathers they put in big covers, pillows, and sleeping bags to keep warm, which vegans are obviously completely opposed to, as it requires killing birds. This will never bring the sleeping bag or my grandfather back, but every morning I now get to wake up and chuckle at the fact this may be the very moment some jerk thief who happens to be also vegan will also wake up in my grandfather's sleeping bag. But every morning I now get to wake up and chuckle at the fact that this may be the very moment some jerk thief who happens to be also a vegan will also wake up in my grandpa's sleeping bag only to notice a real feather is tickling the tip of his nose, and in sheer horror comes to the realization that the stolen sleeping bag he has been sleeping in so comfortably is actually a huge warm pile of dead birds. This may seem cruel, but I have no respect for the jerk who did this to me. The thought of his face when he makes that discovery makes me smile at the memory of my grandfather. The sleeping bag is old and has a few holes, so this is likely to happen sooner than later. And to top it all off, my grandfather worked for one of the most notorious environmentally destructive transnational corporations. I'm actually slightly embarrassed that this is my heritage, and I'm by no means proud of it being a nature enthusiast. But screw it. If it means I can toast my grandfather at the expense of some stealing jerk who's literally sleeping in his own hypocrisy, I'm more than happy to do so. The thief will never know this, but it feeds my cynical sense of humor. So there you go. The story of how I got back at a thief without even meaning to. Disclaimer: this has nothing to do with veganism. I just have no respect for jerks in general. It was one day when my mother asked me to go to the local grocery store to pick up some things for her. She was preparing for a big feast on Thanksgiving. Since my parents were inviting most of our family members to spend it with us this year, she had bought most of the stuff she needed but sent me to pick up a few things she missed. I took my bike and ran to the store with a list my mom wanted me to get. I know my way around this store, I know the employees working there, and they too know me very well. I come across one of the staff members that I'm quite familiar with. We exchange pleasantries for a moment, catch up and wish each other a happy Thanksgiving. It wasn't a minute before a well-known Karen that is frequenting this store appeared out of nowhere right in front of us, and she just started berating the staff member about how he's ignoring her needs / his job right in the midst of a busy day like this, and standing right there chatting with little kids that aren't even his age. She kept threatening the poor guy about calling his manager and getting him in trouble for not doing his job, or worse, getting him in trouble for hitting on little kids in public. Seriously, the guy was just one of the nicest people I know, and he never once crossed a line with me or anyone else I know of. I always thought that he's providing some amazing customer service, and he's one of the few people that seem to be enjoying what he does. He apologizes to her, nods politely to me, and then tries to calm her down and asks her what she needs help with. I am not the most confronting person out there, so while she was on her horrible rant to this poor staff member, all of me was screaming on the inside that she was wrong, that she's a terrible person for what she's doing to this good guy, and that she needs to leave him alone. But sadly, I just couldn't get myself to scream all of that out loud to her face. I just froze there and watched the staff member smile painfully to me before going away and vanishing between the aisles after she kept dragging him around. At that moment, I really wished for some justice, some karma that would put this woman in her place. She's an evil one. She's not just some entitled person asking for attention. I was old enough to understand that the accusations she was threatening him with could easily send him to prison for a long time, and even stain him for the rest of his life. She was not afraid to do that to someone she knew well was innocent of all the horrible stuff she was accusing him of. I swallowed all of that, got washed with the painful feeling of being useless, and just decided to move on and go get what my mom sent me to get. 10 minutes go by and I start hearing a lot of screaming coming from where the Karen and the staff member disappeared earlier. Charged with a huge emotional wave that took over me, I decided to run towards where she is and just tell her off and to stop abusing my good friend and to leave him alone. It was unfamiliar territory to me, but I made up my mind. If I was ever going to stand up to some evil person, it was right now. It was to this woman. When I arrived to where she is, I take a deep breath and try to prepare myself for voicing out how I feel about her and how I despise people like her. However, upon closer look, I see her shrieking and screaming, but it wasn't towards the same staff member from before. Actually, it wasn't any of the staff members that I know of at least. It appears to be a customer. No, wait. Oh god, that's not a customer. I mean, he is, but it's not just any customer. That's Steve, one of the most dangerous people in our town. I know that full well because my mother kept telling me if I ever came across him, to just look down and get out of his way as much as possible. Steve was a well-known criminal in this town. Convicted in more than 10 cases at least, I was known for getting involved in a lot of gang activities. He was someone that had a quiet demeanor. Aside from a nasty scar on his face, if you didn't know him, you wouldn't really think that he's that dangerous. I froze in my place when I recognized it was him. I noticed a staff member from before running towards the manager's office to grab him and probably call the police when he saw that Karen started picking a fight with a one man in town that she shouldn't pick a fight with. I went home that day without getting a single item from the list my mom gave me, but I had my reasons. I went to the store a couple of days after what happened that night and decided to ask the staff member what the heck got her to screech at this guy to start with. And he started telling me what happened after he nodded to me and left with her. He told me that she was just pestering him to find her some stuff all over the store while keeping up with the vile threats. Then she bumped into Steve while walking backwards. She caused him to drop what he was picking from the shelf and then started getting into his face about how he should watch where he's going and stuff like this. Steve did not say a word to her, just kept staring at her the whole time with dead fish eyes. And that got her aggravated even more. Now, I don't know if she knew who he was or not, but at that point it didn't matter, to be honest. She was a Karen. Karen think differently, process things differently, and act on it differently. After a good 5 minutes of screaming into his face with the manager and a staff member trying to calm her down and get her away from him, she shoved him. She probably did just to get any reaction from the numb guy standing right in front of her. That was the last thing she remembers doing before looking down to her stomach and seeing blood gushing out of it. It seemed as if she didn't realize what happened at first. It surely took her a moment to fall into the ground. It took her a very rare, quiet, screeching-free moment to realize that she just got stabbed. Then panic ensued in the store after some bystanders witnessing the whole thing just saw what happened. The manager tried to contain the situation, begging Steve to just calm down and drop the weapon. But surprisingly enough, the guy that just stabbed the woman did not seem to lose his quiet demeanor. He had the same indifferent reaction on his face as before, and just stood there right where he was the whole time. Didn't even try to run or attack anyone else. The cops arrived shortly after, and it seemed that the manager had called him right before any of that even happened. They didn't have a problem cuffing up Steve or stripping him of the weapon he stabbed her with. EMTs took Karen on a stretcher, and everyone that witnessed the whole situation seemed as if they were just stunned, including me. I barely managed to get back home, and after some time, I eventually managed to tell my mother what I just witnessed, and she just looked horrified. I heard later that Karen made it and that she didn't die because of her wound. And even a few months later, I was walking down the street with a couple of my friends and saw her limping to her car while using crutches. Sometimes I wonder if what happened that night to her had any connection to the fact that at one point, when I was in that store seeing her torture that poor guy, I truly wished for karma to strike that woman down and gives her what she deserves. All I'm saying is that she brought this on herself, and that she deserved it. I hope she learned her lesson and came up with something from that horrific experience. And as for Steve, last I heard he was still in prison, for many reasons actually, aside from stabbing that entitled woman. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.